Hello and welcome to Business 360. I'm Shireen Bhan. The headlines that we're tracking for you this evening. Indian equities fall for the fifth session in a row as the broader market sell-off deepens, tracking weak quarterly earnings. Friday's dive has the markets ending lower for the fourth week running. That's the longest losing streak since August 2023. Investors have lost nearly 20 lakh crore rupees in the last 5 sessions. The Lebanon government claims 3 journalists were killed in an Israeli airstrike on a guest house in southern Lebanon, calls it a war crime. Israel says 5 soldiers were killed in fighting in southern Lebanon, over 30, including children, killed in an Israeli airstrike on Khan Yunis in South Gaza.
India is no more a pushover, but we don't negotiate today from a position of weakness.
Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal insists India and the European Union need to be more cognizant of each other's sensitivities to enable free trade. Reiterates India's stance that the agreement needed to focus on trade-related issues rather than aspects of the environment which are of the domain of the United Nations Treaty on Climate Change. The Supreme Court has its eyes set on a fully integrated data center for its IT needs. Is in talks with tech giant Nvidia for possible supply of GPUs for a data center. Top Supreme Court official tells CNBC-TV18 the apex court is looking to deploy AI for transcription and translation of live court proceedings. Indian and Chinese troops begin disengagement at the 2 friction points in eastern Ladakh. Defense officials indicate Indian troops have started to pull back equipment to rare locations in these areas. It's the first thaw in Indo-Chinese relations along the border in 4 years. Premiumization is driving the FMCG sector, currently reeling from a demand slowdown. A Nielsen IQ report highlights that premiumization is half of the incremental sales for the industry, adding that the luxury basket within the FMCG sector is the fastest growing category. President Draupadi Murmu appoints Justice Sanjeev Khanna as India's next Chief Justice. Justice Khanna will succeed the Chief Justice D.Y. Chandrachud, who is due to retire on the 10th of November and will have a short stint of 6 months in office. Justice Khanna was elevated to the Supreme Court in September 2019. Over 30 million voters cast an early ballot in the United States ahead of the November 5th poll. CNBC's All-American survey points to a dead heat, even though Trump holds a slender lead over Harris. Elon Musk's wealth soars to $33 billion after shares of Tesla surge over a strong third quarter. The latest rally puts Musk's net worth over $270 billion. Well, the losses mount on the Lal Street. The Nifty and the Sensex have seen cuts of nearly 1% each as markets remained under pressure, tracking weak Q2 numbers. Mid-caps have taken a harder knock, and that index lost 2% today. With this, the markets have fallen for 5 days in a row, and 20 lakh crores of investor wealth has now been wiped out over this period. Friday's plunge means that the markets have lost ground for the 4th straight week, making this the longest weekly losing streak since August of last year. That's the Nifty down 218 points, the Sensex down 600 points, the mid-cap index down over 1,000 points, and the Nifty Bank lost about 750 points. So across the board, selling pressure there, but the mid-caps bearing the brunt of it, down by about 2%. Prashant is standing by now to wrap up the day's trading action. It's been a tough day and a tough week, Prashant. What is the market opinion now on whether we are in the midst of a correction that is likely to be prolonged?
Shireen, you know, it's small mercies out there, right? Because it was, as you said, a tough day. And as we wrapped up the day, I was just looking at the changes. From the lows, the market actually closed up. On the Nifty, about 150 points. For the Nifty Bank, about 450 odd points. We were still down sharply, about 1% a piece on the Nifty and the Bank Nifty. But the fact that we came up a little bit, I think that was the only silver lining. I'll get to the flows and your question in just a bit. Let me just quickly put on the table what really happened. So off the lows, but sharp cuts, both the Nifty and the Bank Nifty up on your screens. Mid-cap and small-cap indices, it's almost like day before yesterday when you had 10 down for 1 up. The advance decline was pretty poor through the course of the day, and it was about 8:1 in terms of declines to advances. From the high point, from the all-time highs, the losses will come up to the percentage changes. The Nifty has lost about 8%. The Bank Nifty lost about 7.5%. The mid-cap index has lost 9.8 to be precise, and the small-cap index has done 9.6%. So the mid and small-cap indices from their highs reaching the 10% cut marks. We've not seen that in a long time now. So during today, there were again large single stock moves today on the back of earnings and otherwise. IndusInd Bank I mean, completely smashed, and how today, on the back of those poor numbers, Shriram Finance was a big loser. Adani Enterprises, BPCL, Mahindra and Mahindra, some of the others which came off pretty sharply today. Coal India, L&T, NTPC under pressure. FMCG, which has been under pressure for the last 4 days, today saw some respite. It was one of the few indices which ended up. So you had ITC, which was up, Britannia, which was higher, and Axis Bank, that extension for Amitabh Chaudhary, acting as a bit of a sort of support there. Broader market, pretty poor. I'll start with what was down. The financials, AU Bank, Bandhan Bank, Poonawalla FinCorp, all taking it at the chin. You had Dixon, which was down sharply. Numbers were a super beat, but the stock trades at about 80 times one-year forward earnings. HPCL, Motilal Oswal Financial Services. Some of these, of course, just profit booking after sharp runs, and Motilal is a prime poster boy there. Hindustan Copper, Chennai Petro, Viatech Vabag has had a fantastic run. Patanjali Foods, Elecon Engineering, VST Industries are a few others. On the upside, you had Axis Bank, as I said. ITC was up. You had Godrej Consumer, another FMCG name, which outperformed on the back of earnings. Lotus Laboratories earnings push there. Indian Hotels, there was a Morgan Stanley note. There was Torrent Pharma, BKG Foods, Thermax and Max Healthcare, some of the others. Now, to just sum up the question about what next, right? I think the big question we must answer, which I think we'll only know in hindsight, is when will FII stop selling? And the reason that a question is important is because mutual funds have bought dollar for dollar what FIs have sold. That number is about 1 lakh crores in October so far. And this is how the math adds up. So FIs have sold about $12 billion in October. Inflow into equity mutual funds is about $4 billion per month. Starting cash levels with mutual funds were about $17 billion. You take about $5 billion of IPOs and QIPs we've seen in the month of October and the strong pipeline ahead. The question is, will the selling intensity from FIIs slow down? Because if it does not, mutual funds and the dry powder that they've been supporting the market with, that will start to run dangerously low. So I think that becomes the number one question. And there, I mean, to answer that question, there are too many moving parts. There is China, but as you were reading as part of the headlines, the US elections, I think, are also equally important. Back to you.
Well, thanks very much, Prashant. Yes, all of those will be developments that we will track as we start next trading week. But of course, we've closed on a somber note for this one. Now, the big ongoing geopolitical conflict continues to intensify. A barrage of Israeli missiles pounding southern suburbs of Beirut overnight. The Lebanese government says 3 journalists covering the war have been killed in a targeted strike in southern Lebanon. It's called the attack a war crime. The journalists who have died worked for 2 pan-Arab news broadcasters. Meanwhile, Israeli forces have claimed that 5 soldiers were killed while fighting in South Lebanon. In separate actions, Iran-backed militia group Hezbollah fired dozens of rockets towards northern Israel. Israeli defense forces claim that around 50 rockets were identified and partially intercepted by its air defense systems. The situation in northern Gaza has also worsened. Nearly 150 people are feared trapped in a hospital which was hit by intense shelling by the Israeli military. Gaza's civil defense forces have warned of mass casualties in refugee camps across northern Gaza. An airstrike has also killed over 30 civilians, including children, in southern Gaza's Khan Yunis. Meanwhile, Lebanese officials have demanded help to expand the army and rebuild. Germany and the European Union have promised monetary aid for rebuilding efforts in Lebanon.
The sequence of the stability equation is, first, an immediate ceasefire. Second, full implementation of UN Security Council Resolution 1701. Third, deployment of 8,000 Lebanese Army Forces soldiers south of the Litani. Fourth, resume the diplomatic efforts to address disputes along the blue line in order to reach a deal that can secure long and sustainable stability in South Lebanon.
Well, that's the latest there in global news. Now, Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal insists that India and the European Union need to be more cognizant of each other's sensitivities to enable faster movement on a free trade agreement. Goyal was speaking at the 18th Asia-Pacific Conference of German Business. He reiterated India's stance that the agreement needs to focus on trade-related issues rather than aspects of the environment, which are the domain of the United Nations Treaty on Climate Change. Take a look.
First, the sensitivities between the two, your 27 countries and my 27 states collectively as the Union of India. If we respect each other's sensitivities, with Australia, with UAE, with FTA, the very first decision we took was we'll respect each other's sensitivities and not encroach on issues which can hurt. Moment we decided that, a lot of, for example, dairy, I just can't open up dairy. If the European Union insists that I open up dairy, there's no FTA. And we don't have dairy. Australia's first FTA without dairy. They respected us. Second, if you respect the sensitivity of a $2,500 per capita economy with a $60,000 per capita economy, where our people also aspire to reach that 60,000, if not more. We have to respect that. We have to give them that transition, that opportunity to get there. And third, I think it's very important to respect that India is no more a pushover. For example, once upon a time in the Uruguay round of negotiations at the WTO, we were saddled with a lot of liabilities which were very unfortunate. We are paying the price of that even today. But we don't negotiate today from a position of weakness.
That is the Commerce Minister. Now back to earnings. Indigo's parent Interglobe Aviation has reported its Q2 numbers. The airline's loss, it has in fact posted losses in this quarter. Vinny joins us now. Vinny, a surprise there coming in from Indigo, losses after 7 or 8 quarters. Take us through what's happened here.
Absolutely, losses that we're seeing coming in after 8 quarters, though the expectation was also of a loss, but we were expecting somewhere around a 194 crore loss. But this 988 crore loss is much sharper than what we were expecting in terms of a loss. Last year, obviously, they were reporting a profit, so that is one thing that is surely negative. Yes, grounding of aircrafts, that's something that is hurting the company. Other than that, in terms of when you look at the forex loss, that's at around 2,460 crores this time. So that also does impact in terms of the loss figure. But yes, a sharper number in terms of a loss that we're seeing. Revenue growth, not much of an excitement there, 13.5% growth. Do not forget that Q2 generally is a weak quarter for airlines and for Indigo as well. So that is something that does come into impact and play over here. When you're looking at the passenger yield, that is coming in line with what we're expecting. Rupees 4.5 per kilometers is what we're looking at. Last year it was 4.44. So slight bit of an increase, at least in terms of the yields. And margins are coming in line with what we were expecting at CNBC-TV18. EBITDA margin at 14.3% versus, 14.3% versus 14%. So almost in line with the expectation of the street as well as CNBC was expecting. EBITDA also coming in at 2,434 crores, which is slight bit better than what we were expecting. So yes, when you're looking at it in terms of margins, surely it is decent, but the loss is something that one should be concerned about, because after 7 quarters, the company has actually reported a loss.
Yes, so that is a weak number there coming in from Indigo. Rising maintenance costs and higher fuel bill has impacted numbers there. Now, staying with earnings, JSW Steel reported an 85% drop in net profit on an annual basis in the second quarter. Revenue declined 11%. EBITDA slipped 31% on a yearly basis. The company also reported a one-time loss of 342 crore rupees as part of a surrender of a mining lease in Odisha. SpiceJet has said the company has settled a $4.5 million dispute with Lesser Shannon Engine Support for an aggregate sum of $2 million. SpiceJet in a statement said both parties had reached this agreement via amicable negotiations and have chosen to resolve the matter outside the courtroom. As part of the settlement, all ongoing litigations and disputes between the parties will be withdrawn. Now, the Supreme Court has set its eyes on a fully integrated data center for its IT needs. The top court is set to be in talks with tech giant NVIDIA for a possible supply of GPUs for a data center. A top Supreme Court official told CNBC-TV18 the apex court is looking to adopt AI for transcription of live court proceedings. Ashmit joins us now with more details. Ashmit, so the Supreme Court courting NVIDIA, a possible data center in the offing?
Well, the fact that NVIDIA GPUs have long queues stretching across the block, they've fast become urban legend. And now that queue just got a little longer in the form of an unexpected client. And this one happens to be the Supreme Court of India. We were speaking to some very highly placed officials within the administration of Supreme Court. And what they tell us is that not only is Supreme Court pursuing a data center, but also it happens to be India's largest content creator. They were citing lakhs and lakhs of pending cases, judgments, orders, filings, documents that are being put out. And further, they went on to reveal that this will only grow from here, given as how the Supreme Court is contemplating live streaming across various courts. Just to point out for the benefit of our viewers, the Supreme Court is not a single courtroom. There are 17 courtrooms running in parallel. So when this data starts coming out, that will require a vast volume of data management, which is the very reason the Supreme Court is now investing in a data center. This data center is likely to support not just the large volume of data, but also will support various IT support applications that are currently running as a part of this apex court. And it is in pursuance of this data center aspiration that we understand that the CJI, that the administration of the Supreme Court has been in conversation with NVIDIA for their GPUs. They are in conversations to understand, number one, of course, the availability, and also then subsequently the maintenance, the cost, the repair work and operations of these GPUs is something that is currently under consideration. One aspect is very clear. The apex court officials pointing out that they are keen on onboarding this emerging technology bus, which is of data center of AI. They are already talking about deployment of AI for transcription, for translation. So clearly, the Supreme Court looking to come on board. Of course, we'll have to see how this journey pans out between NVIDIA and the apex court.
All right, Ashmit, appreciate you joining us. We will head into a break, but up next, Indian and Chinese troops begin disengagement at the two friction points in eastern Ladakh. Defense officials indicate Indian troops have started to pull back. We will get you more when we return. We learned from sources that Indian and Chinese troops have begun the disengagement process in Depsang and Demchok in eastern Ladakh. Remember, these were the last two friction areas along the line of actual control. Parikshit is standing by now with the details. Parikshit, what does this mean for both sides?
Well, Depsang and Demchok, these were the only two areas or friction points which had to be resolved. The friction points in other areas along the LAC in eastern Ladakh had already been resolved and disengagement had been achieved. So from Tuesday, we have seen disengagement on the ground in both these friction points. What this essentially means that Indian and Chinese troops have started moving back, and the agreement actually between India and China right now is to make sure that troops on both sides of the Indo-China border move to positions as they existed before April 2020. What does disengagement mean? Does it mean troops removal? No. This means troops will move back. Any temporary construction or structures that were built, that will be removed by both sides. What is the next step? Next step would be de-escalation and de-induction. The eventual aim is to achieve that. So no reduction in troops on either sides at the moment. What we will see is regular commander level talks to make sure that this disengagement process of moving back troops is achieved. Regular conversation between the patrols of two sides to make sure there is no kind of escalation. Confidence building measures on the ground. We will also see patrolling starting after the 28th or 29th of October. The current disengagement that we're seeing, it has to be completed by the 29th of October. And after that, we will see patrolling by the two sides as it happened before April 2020.
All right, Parikshit, appreciate you joining us. Premiumization has been the big growth driver for the FMCG sector. Despite the overall slowdown, a Nielsen IQ report highlights that premium brands are seeing double-digit growth. Shilpa is standing by with more on the demand dichotomy, which continues. No convergence yet, Shilpa.
Well, premiumization in FMCG is not exactly a new trend. But when the urban consumption is slowing down, a Nielsen IQ report interestingly shows that the premium and luxury segment continue to grow. And it's growing fast. The report indicates that the premium brands in the FMCG sector are consistently growing approximately twice as fast as their non-premium counterparts. And despite the overall sector unable to clock a double-digit growth, the premium segment is consistently growing at double-digit rates across all markets and across all premium categories. Now, these numbers now will paint a picture. Look, if you look at the value contribution to FMCG sales as against the mass, premium plus segments, right, they together roughly contribute about 27%. Now, this segment also contributes about 42% if you look at the sector's value growth overall as against just the mass or the mainstream segments. Now, what's leading this trend? Now, increasing income levels, urbanization, smartphone penetration, penetration and a more aspirational consumer base. And unlike the rest of the segment, consumption volumes in the premium segment, right, that is also growing almost twice the pace of price increases. This is driven by categories like personal care, home care, processed food, etc. So this is the consumer, right, that is looking at the value more than the price and is buying more on digital platforms. Now within the premium also, luxury brands, these are brands which are priced 2 times the category average. They are all the rage. They're standing out as the fastest growing category. Now consumer majors recently that posted results in the past couple of days also alluded to this trend. HUL, for instance, said that premiumization trend sustained even in this quarter is growing at around 30%. And despite the overall sentiment, now Colgate-Palmolive, for instance, that said that while mass segment grew for Colgate, premium segment grew faster. And in the Alcobev space also, United Breweries volumes, in fact, the premium volumes grew 27% as against the overall volume growth of just 5%. So now, while the overall demand is subdued, India's consumer is continuing to be aspirational. And what is changing here really is what they want to spend on and how they want to spend.
And how much money they have to spend. Shilpa, many thanks for joining us. With that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of Business 360. The news will continue right here on CNBC-TV18. But for now, from all of us, goodbye. Thanks for watching.